Hey everyone! I should put my headphones on. Oh, that's gonna mess things up, but I'll fix it. Don't worry, I'll fix it after this. Um, so, welcome everyone to the MuseScore Cafe for today, August, whatever it is, 4th or so. Yep, and it's time for our regular monthly Ask Me Anything session. So, this is your opportunity to ask me any questions you have about using MuseScore. So, again, did I say my name is Marc Sabatella with Mastering MuseScore? And so I'm taking questions on pretty much anything having to do with using MuseScore. I'm pretty open as to, what these questions can be about. Usually most weeks I'll have a topic that I'll talk about, but this time when I do these first Wednesday of the month, it's pretty much anything. So I'm looking here and I see a lot of check-ins from around the world, which I love to see, and no questions yet, so I can attempt to... Okay, so I know my screen is about to go blank as soon as I plug these headphones in, but it'll be worth it. I'll fix it after that. I'll let the music finish. There we go. Okay, so give me 1 second to fix this. Hey, is it working still? I thought it was going to mess up because usually when I plug in the headphones, it messes things up. If I plug in the middle of broadcasting, but it seems like it didn't. Let me just make sure that that I'm good here. So give me 1 moment, but please start asking questions. I've got, something that I can... Okay, so Dave put up a voices question. Where did you put that, Dave? Is it here in the chat? Is it here in the chat, or is it in the... it's probably in the community. So those of you who aren't aware, who aren't already on board with this, I have, the Mastering MuseScore community site here. And so this is where you can continue all the conversations that we start in the chats and so forth here. And the conversation here, Voices Revisited, is this the question? Okay. All right, so this, I guess, is the question you're asking, Dave. So I guess my question to you is, I'm reading over this. I'm not sure what your question actually is, because there's 2 voices in each staff, and you just enter them left or right. I mean, that's pretty much all there is to it. I will go ahead and enter that exact example. In fact, I'll shrink down. Let me raise my sound level here. I'm going to shrink my screen so I can see both of these things at once. Give me a moment. All right. So I want to enter that. Voice 1. What did I do? Oh, C. Oh, because yours is in C minor. Anyhow, voice 1 entered. Voice. Let me go ahead and add the key signature. Voice 2. So there's, okay, so voice 1 has just been entered. Now voice 2. I switch to voice 2. I'm using the keyboard shortcut, Control-Alt-2, and it's E flat down in this octave, D, E flat, D, and it doesn't even matter what comes next. And then if I want to add another staff, sure, I'll add another staff and add these also. Voice 1 on top, G, G, F sharp, G, and then go back to the previous measure. Switch to voice 2, C, B flat, A flat, G. Boom. It's really just left to right, each voice one at a time. So if you do exactly what I did, you will get exactly those results. So if you're not getting those results, I guess the question is, what are you doing differently from what I did? What I did was I entered each voice left to right. No stop. I didn't try to go back and like do this voice note, then back into this way. It's possible to do that, but I usually do an entire measure at a time, or an entire phrase. Maybe I'll do 3 or 4 measures, whatever makes sense, to enter one voice. And then I'll go back to the beginning of the passage and enter the second voice. If you enter notes into a given voice, I guarantee they stay in that voice. They never move from voice to voice unless you issue the command to do that. So if you leave note input mode, like you notice that I left note input mode because I needed to change the key signature, and then I left it again to add the second staff. If you leave note input mode and then you make the mistake of, let me go back to full screen now because I don't need your example anymore. If you make the mistake of saying, oh, I want to enter voice 2 now, like let's say that I hadn't entered voice 2 in that bottom staff yet, and I click this note and then say, oh, I'm ready to enter voice 2. Let me click the voice 2 button and then go to note input mode. No, that's backwards. If you click the voice 2 button while you're not in note input mode, you will in fact move the note to a different voice, because that's the whole point of that command. It will change the voice of the command. So don't do that. Make sure you enter note input mode first. And realistically, I had to fix the key signature, fix the extra staff, but once I did that, there will be no more reason to leave note input mode. I would then go for an hour entering notes if my piece was, that kind of piece where I already had it kind of written out, and now I'm just entering it. I just enter the notes and, stay in note input mode. But if you leave, then if you leave note input mode, just make sure you re-enter it before hitting a voice button. So that's that. Okay, so now I'm sure you probably have a follow-up question, but let me try to answer some other things. So I see a question from Kim about installing new sound fonts, and certainly I can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, let's see, let me go to a new website here. Oh yeah, that's that. That's good. This one will work. This is my, I just wanted a new tab. I'm going to go to MuseScore.org, and in MuseScore.org, I'm going to go to the handbook, and I'm going to search on the page for sound fonts. And when I click on that, and I'll actually post this link into the chat just to save you all the trouble. And I see that there's some other questions in the community, so yeah, I'll get to those as well. All right, so sound fonts misspelt, but you all can see. The link is good. So the reason I put this in here is A, it has good information on it, but B, it's actually got a list of sound fonts. And so I can go through this list and try downloading something. So like, for instance, I'm looking to see if there's a particular sound font that I feel like would be a good choice, but whatever. I'm just gonna pick one. I'm gonna go with this old one, Tim GM, which was the original MuseScore sound font from like 10 years ago. So I'm gonna click that to download it, and you'll have to search to find other sound fonts, but just search the web. You'll find them. Now, where I want to download it to is not my scores folder. I'm going to go to MuseScore 3 sound fonts. And so I download into this folder, and it looks like I've already downloaded it. That's fine. I'm going to re-download it just so you can see that. So now I'm going to go to MuseScore, and there is actually a way that kind of sort of works, but I don't trust it, to be honest, where if you go to your file manager and double-click that sound font, it may or may not work to just then automatically install the MuseScore. Totally depends on your operating system and how it's set up, the file associations. I don't trust it. So instead, I'm going to come here, and I'm going to say View. Let's listen to the playback now. Okay, so there's the playback as we have it. In fact, let me re-add those other notes. Oh, I lost them. I remember what it was, though. I go to note input mode, switch to voice 2. That was it right there. Nice little chord progression. So I'm going to go to View, Synthesizer, and now I'm going to hit the Add button, and it's going to show me all the sound fonts that I have in that sound fonts folder. And here's the one, Tim GM 6MB, because it's Tim is the guy that wrote the sound font. GM for General MIDI, meaning it follows the same standard that MuseScore expects as far as knowing which instruments are which. 6MB because it's 6 megabytes. That's the size of it. Anyhow, I now hit the load button. It will go through a message to say loading, and you'll see it has now installed itself at the top of the list. And that's useful if you're installing a general MIDI sound font, because you probably want to immediately start using its sounds. If you've got a whole bunch of sound fonts and you want to use different sound fonts for different instruments, then it gets more complicated. But just the basic idea here is I've installed that sound font, it's at the top of the list, and now I'm done. That's Tim GM 6MB sound font is now installed. And if I want to say, well, let's add a flute now. I'm going to add a flute, and I'm going to make my flute here we go. That's actually not a bad flute for that's a tiny little sound font. But if I want to have the flute use the regular sound font, the regular default sound font, I'm going to open the mixer with F10. Okay, it says Super 0. Don't mind me. That's F10 on my computer. And now I can select that flute track here and look through the list of, so all these sounds now that we're seeing in the list, these are the first sound fonts sounds. So I need to scroll through all of those until I reach the end of the original list, and here's the start of the second sound fonts sound. So not grand piano. I want, in fact, what I'm just going to do is type flute. I start typing flute, and it takes me directly there in the list. So now I'm going to hear. Now it probably doesn't sound that much different because they're both pretty good flutes, but the other flute was flute TB. That's the Tim sound font version. And when I type FLU again, it takes me to whatever the next one. FL takes me down there. Be sure, by the way, you use the flute expert. That's actually the one you want if it's available, because that's the one that supports single note dynamics, so it can crescendo and diminuendo, within a single note. So for wind instruments, you want the expert versions of the sounds. All right, so I'm going to flip over to the community site again, because I gather there are other questions in here. And let me see, questions and scores. I should have checked these earlier, but I had some other stuff going on this morning that I had to deal with. So the site is being strangely slow. All right, so best way to add an alternative measure. Okay, I think my guess is you are referring to I think you're referring to what's called an ossia, and that's what you're referring to here. So I'm reading the question, and not impact the score a great deal. All right, so here's an example. Just tag the, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at your score here, but I'm going to guess that I know what you mean without seeing it. Okay, so here's your alternative measure. If what you want is to see it like in small print above the other measure, like you want it above measure 6, let's just go ahead and do that. I'll download that score. Download. Back to my scores folder, and I'll go ahead and put it in my Cafe folder. All right, and now I'll open this guy. Okay, so what we're going to do, and I'm just going to do it with one staff because in the interest of time, but you'll see how it works. I'm going to go ahead and add the additional staff. So I'm going to go ahead and just add it as another staff here, but I'll move it up with the arrow buttons here. And so now I have an additional, did I move it? I guess I moved the wrong one. Look at that. So how about move the treble one on top? What did I do? Oh, add staff. Boy, I'm fumbling here. Let me do this again. I must have hit the wrong button here, and it's, so is this now what I want? And then I want this extra staff on top. So this extra staff, I'm going to move up and up. All right, there we go. All right, and because I just added a staff, MuseScore doesn't understand the braces. I'm going to have to fix. In fact, I'm just going to get rid of the curly brace and re-add it because I really want it to only be on those two staves. I don't want my extra staff connected. All right, now you have an extra staff, but you of course don't want that extra staff most of the time, right? So let's say that this is what you want. That measure there for measure 6. I'll paste it in here. Oh, by the way, it should be treble clef. All right, so now I have that measure there. But of course, you don't want it there. You don't want that staff there all the time, right? You want it there just for that measure. So here's what you do. Right-click it, staff part properties, where it says hide when empty. Yeah, always. The auto setting means it's going to obey the global hide empty staves setting, but we don't want that because we don't want to have to turn that option on. We want to be able to leave it off so that other empty staves don't disappear. So I'm going to say hide when empty always, and then I'm going to check the cutaway box. Boom. Now I have more or less what I want. I say more or less because clearly it didn't quite do what I might have expected with the volta here, the ending. It had problems with that, so I might have to work around that somehow. But that's doable. I mean, I could add that volta to just this staff using control. If I go here and say control and click that volta, now it's added to just that staff. And then I can take the top one and make it invisible. So there's little tricks like that that you can use to get around that sort of weirdness there. But there's another method of doing this. So I added another staff and made it hide when empty always and cutaway. But there's another way of doing it that, depending on your score, might make more sense. So I'm going to undo all my changes. This time I'm going to come over to this extra measure, and I'm just going to come here and I'm going to put it on a new page all by itself to make this job a little easier, or a new line by itself anyhow. No, I want a new page. So I'm going to use Control Enter. So on a new page now, I'm going to use the image capture tool to take a picture of it. Image capture tool is that camera icon there. Control C to copy. Oh, the resolution is set to 300 dots per inch. That's actually big. Well, you'll see what it's like. So did I do the Control C? Yes, there's the Control C. Now I leave image capture mode, and then I can come back over here. I think I can actually select the measure and press Control V. Nope, that did it to every note. So select a note, Control V, and then I'm going to want to disable auto placement for that image so it doesn't try to do anything fancy with it. Actually, I don't want to disable autoplay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it back on because I do want it to, well, I don't want it to, I don't want the chord symbols here above that alternate image. So I guess I will disable the autoplay so I can place that image where I want it, size it how I want, and then I can use a spacer. Because I disabled autoplace, it's not adding the space automatically. So I can use a spacer from the Breaks and Spacers palette here. To make sure I've got enough room for that thing. So that idea of using a little image is occasionally a better way of doing it. Sometimes the cutaway depends on how much you're doing it, how detailed you want the information to be. If you think you're going to want to edit that information later, all of those things will affect. So, all right, so there's that. All right, I'm going to just keep zooming along here. So ossia, yeah, that's the term there. Can you copy and paste music with time signature changes within it? No, that's the long and short of it is that is not a feature we currently have. It's been a common request. Someday, I have no doubt someone will come up with a good way of designing how that feature should work in terms of, how it works if you have only selected certain staves, how it should work if you're trying to insert a passage versus replace a passage, how you should specify when you do versus don't want the time signature to replace. Someone has to decide how all that's going to work, integrate it nicely into the existing design of the user interface, and then implementing it is the easy part. But so far, no one has tackled the difficult design part of that job. Okay, so as far as the questions here, yeah, Michael asked a question a few days ago about scanning, and I don't really have any great answers about fixing scanned images, scanned scores. They're likely just going to be problematic. All right, so now I'm going to return to the chat to see what questions have come in. Okay, so there's new sound fonts. Add chord tones down an octave. So yeah, so this there is a shortcut for add interval below, but it is not set up. In other words, if I add a C and then I press Shift 8, no, it's not Shift 8, it's Alt 8. Alt 8 will add an octave above. Well, there is a command. If I go to Edit, whoops, if I go to Edit, Preferences, Shortcuts, and then search here for octave, you'll see there is a command there, enter octave below, that has no shortcut defined for it. That's because we ran out of combinations that worked on all operating systems and all keyboards. But in fact, there's combinations left that still work on at least some combinations. So octave, if I click that command, click the define button here, I can try, I think on this system, Control Alt 8 will work. Yeah, Control Alt 8 works on this system. It doesn't work, unfortunately, on French keyboards. Is one of the systems it doesn't work on, but on this one it does. So now I have a add octave below command. Control Alt 8. There you go. So you can define a shortcut for that, or you could just use the standard Alt 8 and then take those notes and move down 2 octaves, Control up, down. But yeah, I recognize often people enter notes and as a melody and then fill in chords below, and yeah, it's not optimized for that sort of thing, to be sure. All right, that was a nice quick question there. Is there a way to force them down? All right, wait a minute. Dallin. Okay, transcribing barbershop, note stems for lead, keep pointing up on note entry. Yeah, you don't need to do that at all, Dallin. As soon as you enter the second voice, the stems flip, right? So watch. If I'm entering on this top staff, right, the stems are kind of going every which way, but as soon as I go back here and start entering voice 2, notice all the stems flipped up as the notes got entered. So don't mess with the stems. They take care of themselves. That's the quick answer there. All right. Marla's got a question about harp scores using a grand staff, but scores can be in 2 treble staves. What's the second one called? I don't know. Bottom staff. I don't know. I don't have a better word for it there. That's why one reason I never talk about the treble staff and the bass staff, because even piano music also switches between staves between clefs all the time. So I try to be in the habit of always talking about top and bottom staff, not treble and bass staff. Okay, so Dave was also asking about the shortcut for switching voices. It's Shift Alt number. So if I'm in note input mode, notice my note cursor is blue and voice 1 is selected there. Shift Alt 2. Oh, wait a minute, not Shift Alt 2. Control Alt 2. I have to think. It's like sometimes motor memory is better for me than my voice for saying these things. So Control Alt 2, Control Alt 3 for voice 3, etc. Control Alt 1 for there. So yeah, as long as you stay in note input mode, then switch voices all you want. If you leave note input mode, just know that those same commands can be used to move notes from one voice to another, which is a great thing. It's often a very useful thing to be able to do. Like if I decide, oops, I didn't mean to enter anything there. If I decide, you know what, this G here, I'd rather have it in voice 1. Well, I can just say Control Alt 1, and now it's in voice 1. It's a great feature, but just know that that command is going to do that. It's the same with the durations, for that matter. Think about that. If I select a note and press a duration, it changes the duration to a half note. Brilliant command. It changes the duration of the selected note when you're in normal mode. But, of course, when you're in note input mode, changing to half note doesn't change the note you entered. It just sets you up to enter a half note. So the toolbar buttons are fairly consistent in that way. They do one thing in normal mode, which is change a note. They do something else in note input mode, which is prepare for the next note. So, in fact, accidentals used to be the one thing that was inconsistent, and about a year ago that was fixed so that the accidentals now also work that same way. Okay, hey, I'm catching up. You guys aren't fast enough. No, I'm not. I just haven't scrolled enough. So, okay, so let's keep going. I feel like I just missed something, but I don't see it now. X flip stems. Yeah, X definitely flips stems. So if you need a stem in the wrong direction, according to the standard rules of notation, use X. But if you just want the standard thing where stems go up for voice 1, down for voice 2, they take care of themselves. And yeah, what's happening is they flip on their own as something else gets entered into voice 2. As long as voice 2 is empty, the stems are in their sort of traditional default settings where they, point towards the middle of the staff. But as soon as you start entering into voice 2, then it happens. So I will try to do that again. So you see this? I'm going to enter. So there's 4 notes entered. Now watch what happens as I enter voice 2. I'm going to enter voice 2. I'm going to enter the C. The moment I enter a note into voice 2, all those stems just flipped up. Now, I'm going to leave note input mode for a second. I'm going to delete this rest. I'm going to delete this rest. Watch what happens. As soon as I deleted that rest on beat 3, then the notes that were flipped up because of that rest, they flip back down. In choral music, you probably don't do that very often. You want to show the rest because every singer needs to read their own rhythms and they need their own rest. But in piano music, it's not uncommon to have things like, actually, let me show you a good example. A good example would be like if I wanted in voice 2 a rest and then, nope, not a quarter note, but an eighth note. All right, let's say I wanted this. I'm going to delete that rest now, delete this rest now. This is pretty common. In fact, this note here belongs in voice 1, and I'll delete that rest. So in other words, we have basically just one voice with the second voice only used for that one beat. In that case, because it's completely clear by the context of what's surrounding it, it's permissible to delete those rests here. It's obvious. As a pianist, we don't need to just read voice 2, right? There's not a singer who's trying to figure out, hey, I'm voice 2, what do I sing on that first beat? It doesn't matter, right? You're just a pianist, you just put your fingers down. So this type of notation is completely acceptable for piano or for guitar, but not so much for choral music. You would want to show those rests. Okay, so how do I get a grid with 3 columns in the lines palette? Oh, I think I know what you mean. And so the palettes, so let me open my lines palette. The palette window, this is actually exactly how I set the width. You can control the width of your palette window, just drag, right? And the way I set my width is using the lines palette. I open the lines palette and then I slowly drag until I'm just down to 2, and then slowly drag until I'm just up to 3. Now I've got the perfect width for my palettes. I don't do that often because once you've set it, it's done. But of course, because I'm doing these demonstrations all the time and I'm having to reset settings all the time, yeah, I do actually end up having to do that reset more often than a normal person would. Under normal circumstances, you set that palette, you're done. So anyhow, that's how you do it. You just drag there, and then you set the thing. The grid should already be there. You should already see those grid lines there. But actually, that's a property. If I click the 3 dots and go to Palette Properties, Show Grid. So I could turn off my grid. Now I don't have a grid there. But that palette had the grid by default. I think not all palettes do. Like the Key Signatures palette does not have the grid by default because it would be kind of distracting. And same, anything with staff lines basically would be distracting if you also saw the grid. So typically it's the palette. It's actually pretty clean looking without the grid too. I kind of like it. I might leave it for a minute. But I don't like that sound font. So I am going to go back to View, Synthesizer, and just get rid of Tim. Sorry, Tim. It's a great sound font considering it's only 6 megabytes in size. It's tiny. And we used to be concerned with the size of the download because people would have slow internet connections and stuff. So 10 years ago, it was important to us to keep the download size of MuseScore small. These days, we're a little more okay with letting it be bigger. But we also have created new technology for compressing sound fonts. And so now even our better sound font now isn't as big as it would have had to have been 10 years ago. Okay, so let's see. Harmony below melody. With melody on separate staves and then imploding. Yeah, Bob, that absolutely works. And I almost said that. But I kind of figured that most people wouldn't be very happy with it. But it is absolutely true that let me add a couple more flutes, shall we? I'm going to add a couple more flutes. So if you've got a flute here and you've entered your melody, oh, I wanted it to be Mary Had a Little Lamb, but I forgot I'm in C minor. Oh well. All right. Sad Mary Had a Little Lamb. Mary lost her little lamb. So if I want to harmonize this below, the thing is, usually if people are doing what they're doing here, it's because they don't want the separate staves. In fact, they might plan on exploding them later. However, it is absolutely true. Whoops. And then, let's see. Some flutes can play that, see? All right, I now have... Oh, wow, my piano part kind of played along too and kind of harmonized with it. How cool is that? I didn't actually mean that. I thought it was a separate system. But anyhow, I'm loving it. So now I can go to Tools, Implode, and when I do the implode, it actually brought them all to separate voices. But then I can do the implode again, and now it combines the voices. And then I can get rid of those other 2 staves notes that I don't really need. So that totally works. But the advantage of doing it by just adding pitches to the existing notes is that you can then piggyback off the rhythms that were already entered. And people just often like to look at it this way. If you're used to seeing chords on a staff, it can be easier to read that way than to read it with everything all exploded like that. But it absolutely works. By the way, something that came up in the forum today, I just entered this and I'm in the wrong key, right? I'm in C minor. I really mean to be in C major. Well, let's fix that. Let's come over here and fix this. I'm going to add a C major key signature there. Now I have a C major key signature, but it doesn't change the notes, right? The notes are still E flat. That's just so pretty, actually. But what I can do now is select that passage, and I'm going to use the diatonic transpose commands. Diatonic transpose commands move by step within the key, and it's Shift Alt down arrow. On my keyboard, that actually is a reserved keyboard for something else, so I had to redefine it. It's going to be Shift Alt bracket, but it's going to be the same thing. So I'm going to use Shift Alt left bracket, and it moved everything down. Notice it got rid of the accidentals. It just moved everything down a staff line and got rid of the accidentals. And now Shift Alt up will move everything back. So it does it within the key. So it basically lost the accidentals. Beautiful. So now I'm major again. So that's a way, if you ever find that you've done that, entered a bunch of notes with the wrong key signatures, now the pitches are wrong, that will fix it real quick. Just 2 keystrokes, down, up. All right. So is there a way to have arpeggiation apply to both staves? Yes, kind of. So I will show you that and then show you the kind of aspect of it. I'm going to add an arpeggio marking to the top staff here. Let me close some palettes up. Oh, by the way, there's an option that I sometimes use here. If I no, I don't right click. I use the 3 dots now. Open only one palette at a time. I think I'm going to enable that option for the purpose of this demo, so that when I open a palette, the other ones all close. I don't normally work in that mode because often I'm using multiple palettes at a time, but for this demo, I have a feeling I'll be better off this way. So I want to go to the Arpeggios palette. I'll add my arpeggio, and notice when I did that, it's only one voice. Well, I'm going to select the bottom note, and I'm going to use Shift down. That actually extends down to the bottom staff. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't extend across both voices, but I can then use the arrow keys by themselves. In fact, I'm going to use Control down. It extends this staff space at a time. So Control down, Control down. And now my arpeggio is extended across both staves, both voices. So yeah, it does. There is no sort of automatic built-in way for it, but at least knowing that Shift down will extend to the bottom staff, that saves an awful lot of headache, because most of the workarounds you'd use for that are not very good, right? They're fragile. If the staff spacing ever changes, it doesn't work, and you have to disable automatic placement for them, or it pushes the bottom staff further away. So this Shift down is a great shortcut to know. Shift down is, it's how you extend things. In the same way that, like, if I enter a hairpin here, that crescendo, Shift right is what extends, and Shift left is what compresses that hairpin a note at a time. So it's kind of meant to be reminiscent of that. All right. I saw another question about the width of a line. You want a straight line between 2 notes to indicate voice leading. So to make them look bolder. All right. So yeah, if you want to show the voice leading, like you want it for some reason to show that this F sharp here is resolving to that G, I'm going to select both of the notes, F sharp and G, and now I'll go to Add Lines, Note Anchored Line, and that adds the line between the notes. Now, if you've been using the lines palette for that, don't. It's great if you want a line above the staff or below the staff, but if you want a line directly connecting notes, that note anchored line is the way to do it. Now, when you do that, notice it's actually connecting the note centers. Maybe that's not what you want, so maybe you want to use Control left to move that endpoint 1 staff space to the left, and then press Tab to select the other endpoint, and then Control right to move its endpoint. Oh, I guess I actually moved the whole line when I did that. I didn't mean to. Let me reset. I'm surprised that happened, but I guess it does. So I have to do it the other way around. I want to make sure that I'm selecting. There we go. Yes. So I guess I have to first move the line, then shorten it. I guess you have to do it in that order. In any case, that shortens the line. Now, if you want to change the thickness of it, the inspector is your place for things like thicknesses of lines. And that applies to regular lines too, not just these fancy note-anchored lines. So line thickness defaults to 0.5 SP, but I can just increase it, make it as fat as I want. Why am I going so fat? Because I want to point out, and then I can get as thin as I want also, and make it, dashed or whatever else I might want to do. I point that out because a neat little trick is to add a line. So I'm going to add a line from the palette here. I'm just going to add a plain line, and then I'm going to select it. I'm going to come here, make it 4 spaces tall. Why 4 spaces tall? Because that's how tall a staff is. Now I'm going to select that line, and I'm going to move that sucker right onto the staff. There we go. I think if I set the Y offset to exactly 2, that probably does the job, although I have to think through that a little more. But in any case, now it's a black bar across your staff. Do you want a black bar across your staff? No, hardly ever. But how about a yellow bar for highlighting? Yeah, I'll take one of those. So now I got a yellow bar on my staff. The problem is, of course, that yellow bar, let's enter some notes. It's opaque. It covers those notes. But how about if I come back to line color, and this time, alpha channel. 255 is computerese for opaque. 0 is completely transparent. 127 is half. So there you go, translucent yellow highlighter. I, in my own workspace, have, and then you can add that to a palette. Like if you think that's something you might use a lot, then not control drag, sorry. Let me reset that thing. Shift, control, drag to the palette. And now I have myself a yellow highlight right there on my palette, ready to just reapply. While it's selected, it's blue. I know that's a little disappointing. It's hard to tell that it's actually that translucent yellow, but it is. You have to trust it. And then all you have to do is move it into position. It unfortunately, in Y offset of 2, seems like it did the job. So that's a neat little trick. Let's see. Can you explain note replacement? We have the rhythm correct and want to change the pitches. Yeah, absolutely, because I almost mentioned it. I started to mention it and didn't in the context of that Mary Had a Little example. I said that maybe you want to leverage rhythms you've already written. So let me enter another rhythm here. I'll enter... I'm not thinking... Here we go. Here's a little rhythm. And what if you decide you want to use the same rhythm in the bottom staff? Okay, I'll select the passage, paste it down here, and now I'm going to come to Note Input Mode icon here, and next to it you'll see there's Repitch mode. And it has a shortcut. I think that's defined by default, but I think step time did not have a shortcut by default, so I had to define it myself. But you'll be thankful to do that, because if you switch to repitch mode, it's going to stay in repitch mode until you change it back. And often, most of us forget to ever change it back. So I like to have a shortcut to be able to do it easily. So Control-Shift-I, Control-Shift-N. So I'm going to come here and go Control-Shift-I, and it puts me in Note Input Mode in Repitch mode. Now, all I got to do is type new pitches. Watch this. You saw how fast I typed those Fs, but I didn't have to change the durations. It just kept the existing duration, but replaced the pitches. And now that I'm done, Control-Alt-I. Dang it, what is it? Control-Shift-N. Sorry, Control-Shift-N. Control-Shift-N. Thank you. To go back to regular note input mode, and then escape to leave note input mode entirely. So that's called repitch mode. And yeah, I use that a fair amount when writing this sort of ensemble music, because it's pretty common that if you're writing for a section, you're going to want all the instruments in that section to have the same rhythm but different pitches. And one way is to enter it all onto one staff and then explode. I do that some, but sometimes it's just more convenient to write it out on separate staves. In any case, they're both options. They both work. So I'm glad they both came up and glad I got to show them both. All right, best trill line to get a trumpet to shake, and not happening. Not happening. Yeah, you can enter the trill. It is not going to sound at all like a shake. Just not going to happen. Now, you might be able to find a sound font that has a shake sound in it, maybe, if you're lucky. And so what you could do is, I'm going to show you this because I feel like I'm going to copy this to here, and then repeat it, and then repeat it again and double the length of it. Oops, doubling only works with a note selected, not with a whole chord selected, which is a drag. All right, so what if I want a different sound just for that note? This came up in the forums or on Facebook or somewhere recently. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a text. I'm going to add from the text palette a change instrument text, and I'm going to change to tremolo strings. Is that even a, no, that's not even an instrument, right? It's really that I'm changing to violin. I'll change to violin and then immediately back to piano. Bear with me. I promise there's a method to my madness here. Change back to piano. And then, of course, I don't really want to see this stuff. I'll mark them both invisible by pressing V. And then I'm going to go to the mixer. And the mixer is F10. I'm going to select that flute staff there. That's the top flute staff. And, I have to select it. I have to open up its channel strip with this arrow here. And you'll see now it's got all these separate settings now for all the different sounds now that I've created on that flute staff. It started as a normal flute, but then I changed to violin. And then apparently I changed to piano because I wasn't thinking that it was really supposed to have been flute, but that's okay. So now I have these 3 channels for violin, and I want to use, I basically want to change the sound of this. What am I doing? You know what, I just want to change the sound. I'm just going to change the sound of the normal here so that instead of violin normal, it's going to be feedback guitar. Actually, feedback guitar, no, I want distorted guitar. How about overdrive guitar? That'll be fun. Let's hear this. So, you hear that? So, you heard me change to the overdrive guitar for just that one note, right? And then I went back to piano when I meant to go. If I double click that, I forget if select instrument. If I right click on this, select instrument, because I really should have gone back to flute is really what I meant. There we go. So by changing instrument for just that sound, I had the opportunity to change the sound there. And so you could do that if you find a sound font that has a good shake sound, trumpet shake sound. You could load that sound font and then change to that sound for just that note. Other than that, though, you're not going to get it in playback. So sorry, it's just MuseScore doesn't have a concept of that. Yeah, the Maynard Ferguson shake is totally a thing. All right, that's the sound of that's my vocal imitation of that trumpet shake. That's a yodel kind of a thing. All right. Is there a foot chart for setting flats, neutral, sharps? I think, Marla, are you asking about the harp diagram, the pedal diagrams that you would put below? Yeah, there definitely is a plugin for that. It's great. It's a wonderful plugin. So let me go ahead and add. Where on earth are? Oh, it's a plucked stringed instrument, right? By the way, I was like hunting through this list. Just use the search and say harp. There you go. Strings plucked harp. I work with a nickel harpa player also. Okay, so now I got a harp in my score. So let's say you want to add, do I have that plugin installed? Do you see anything about harp in here? Looks like I have disabled it. Let me go to my plugin manager, see if it's at least in there. Because I thought I had installed it at some point, but that might have been a whole bunch of factory resets ago. I don't see anything about harp in there. So I'm going to say, no, I don't have it. So I'm going to go to the MuseScore website. And this time I'm going to go to Download, Plugins, and then Harp Pedal Diagram. Yeah, I think that's the right one. Gotta be. Let me just do a search and see what else there is. Harp, 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 harp. Yeah, that's got to be the one there. So harp pedal diagram. And whether or not this is your actual question, it's still going to be worth seeing in the process. So I'm going to say download from MuseScore 3 because that's what I got. And when I save this time, I don't save into my scores folder. I'll go to my scores folder, but I got to go up a level to MuseScore 3 and this time go to my plugins folder. And notice it says it's a zip file. So I'll go ahead and hit save. But now I have to unzip that sucker. So I'll open my file manager and go to that same folder, MuseScore 3 plugins. And I find that thing, harp pedal diagram, and I think, is there an unzip option now? There used to be. Yeah, I don't have a program installed to automatically unzip. It's sort of silly. That's one thing that Chromebook is supposedly fixing. But I can select this folder, copy it, and then go back to where I was. And paste. There's a Linux command for that also, and there's probably other ways of doing it. Yeah, that's one thing I'm not as up on. All right, so I've now pasted that folder in here. So now instead of just the zip file, I have the full thing. Now I can come to Plugins, Plugin Manager, and I need to enable that plugin. So Harp Pedal Diagram, I need to check the box for it and hit OK. Now, finally, I can use my plugin. Plugins, where are you? Harp Pedal Diagram. And what I get is this lovely, lovely dialog box with a picture that I'm sure you find familiar there. And this is where you set what you want it to look like. And there you go. Hit OK. And you got yourself a lovely harp diagram. Now it showed up apparently above the staff. I can hit X to move it below the staff. So that plugin is fantastic. So whether or not that's what you're asking about, I know Humble New Music, you're always asking about how to install plugins. You just saw a demonstration there. It took me 30 seconds, maybe a minute to do. And that was despite fumbling around with unzipping, which is usually the easiest part of it. It's just that on the Chromebook, it's not as, they don't have a simple unzipper, but I'm told that it's coming in like the next release or something. Okay, so let me now return to the chat and see if perhaps, yeah, plug in. Yeah, that's the thing. So isn't that cool? I'll tell you what it's doing though, just so you know, it's not doing magic. This is just staff text. This is text being added from the Edwin font But the thing is that these characters are all there. It just takes work to set up. But if I go and click on this little icon in the lower left, so I'm in the text, right? Actually, let me just do this. I'm just going to enter some plain text. Control, oops, where did I go? Okay, there I am. All right, zoomed in so you can see what I'm doing. I'm editing text here. If I hit this little button here where it says insert special characters or use the shortcut F2, it brings up this dialog box with all these special characters in it. If I go to musical symbols, harp techniques, these are those symbols here. So you can build your own harp diagram, a flat, a natural, a flat, a sharp, a natural, or whatever, you know. So I just built my own out of text like that. So you don't need the plugin for it. The font has these characters in it, and you can just sort of build your own. So it's possible you would find that faster. It's also possible, yeah, it all depends on what you're doing. But anyhow, just know that that's an option also. Those are just characters that you can enter from the font. So is there a standard notation for shakes? Sort of. I mean, the perfect, yeah, I would say the trill is not perfect. So the question again about shakes, like that, let me just enter. If I want to put a shake on this, if you were writing for, you know, jazz, funk, whatever, musicians, and you put a trill there, they would know. I'm just going to put the line with that. Because if you put the TR on it, they're going to say, really? A trill? If you put the version of the line without the trill symbol there, by the way, it defaults to the whole measure because I only selected a note. You're really supposed to select a range first. If you've selected a range first, now it knows to just extend over that range. Because lines, you know, different lines have different characteristics. Voltas should go over the whole measure, but the code is the same, and so it's all kind of shared code. So in any case, select the range you want before clicking the palette, and it will apply to just that range. So this will give you the right effect. Right? If you put the TR in your trill, a trumpet player, even a jazz player, will look at it and go, really? An actual trill? Does he really mean that? I don't know. And then might have to ask you. By leaving the trill, the TR, out of the equation, he'll know you don't mean to trill. However, frankly, that is not the symbol. Whoops. Now that I have the range selected, V made the whole thing invisible. So I might make it invisible, but then add a shake symbol. Now I might use one of these symbols here. Again, ooh, you know what? That's actually not even, I don't want to add it as a line. I'm going to use that special characters. Well, I'll just use the symbols palette this time. I'll press Z to show the special symbols palette. And then I'm going to expand where it said symbols here and look for brass techniques and see if there's a good shake sign. You know, not loving it. Brass smear. Yeah, this is what they want. This is jazz turn. That's not the right symbol. That's ugly. That's not. No, it really should be more of this kind of a squiggly line. You might have to draw it in a drawing program, and then because that just looks like a trill, really. Yeah, so if you drew it in a drawing program and pasted it in there, you could have it to your liking, probably. It's possible that somewhere else. Let me bring that. And this time I'm going to look for shake. Oh, there's one. Guitar shake. Yeah, that's ugly. Don't love it, but it is there. So, you know, there's a possibility also. I think guitar players would laugh at you if you wrote that. I mean, brass players would think, what the heck is that? So I'd rather just draw a line with a drawing program and then add it to my palette and then just start using it. I don't tend to write that enough to care. Okay, so MuseScore opens not full screen. So the thing is, on most operating systems, MuseScore will remember how you last had it. So if you had it full screen, when you last used it and then close it, it will reopen full screen again. However, there's a bug in how it works on Windows where that doesn't work. So on Windows, unfortunately, no, you just have to hit the full screen button or click the little icon every time. It's I don't know if it's a bug in Windows per se, because other programs manage to make it work, but it's a bug with how we work it. So the difference between the symbols palette and the special characters is that they're the exact same symbols. It's that symbols palette you apply directly to a note. I can go to Z and just apply that directly to that note. The special characters palette is something you put in to text. So I can put that same character into text. So I come here. Oh, except there's no search facility in here, so I have to know where it is. It was under guitar, though, right? There it is. So the special characters is for inserting symbols into a text element. However, there's a little more to it than that. What if you say, you know what, I love this symbol here, but it's too big or it's too small? Well, a symbol you add via the symbols palette is a fixed size. Now, someday we might give control over that, but right now it's a fixed size. However, if I delete that and add the same thing as staff text, this time I'll press F2, click that same thing, and now it's staff text. Now it's sizable. So, well, you see the default size was kind of small, but now I can use the inspector to make it bigger, right? Or smaller. So using the special characters palette is a way to get those symbols to be any size you want. Most of them are designed to be a standard size. I mean, if you're using a sharp sign, it's always supposed to be the same size, so that there we go. So that it totally fills a space, right? Clef is supposed to be a certain size so that the bottom of this, touches that line, etc. So most of the symbols have a correct size, and there's not normally a need to resize them. But for a lot of the symbols, it can be useful anyhow. So go ahead and add it as text. All right. I feel like I've caught up, and I feel like I've been going on for my normal length of time here. So is there anything I missed in here that someone wants to say, oh, could you please go back and catch the whatever that I missed? I'm scrolling down to see, but I think I think I've got everything that I see here. So yeah, I'm going to wrap up here then. So I want to come back here, reset my volume. By the way, double-clicking on the slider, you can't see that because my face is covering it, but double-clicking a slider will usually reset it to default value. Because I need to turn down the volume of the music so that I can successfully talk over it. So, thanks everyone for all of your wonderful questions, and it's just kind of fun for me to do this. It's kind of fast-paced as I try to keep up with everything, and it's a lot of fun for me. So this is Marc Sabatella with Mastering MuseScore, and now it's time for me to give you the commercial announcement. Be sure to check out the community. Be sure to check out my online courses. At the top of this chat, I posted the link to my website, masteringmusescore.com. So MasteringMuseScore.com is like my overall website, but there's two components to it. There's the school and there's the community. And you can get to one from the other nice and easily. The school is where you can sign up for my courses, like the course that I have for teaching you MuseScore, or my theory courses. So definitely check them out. Check out the courses, or you can become an all-access member, which gives you access to all my courses, as well as special content areas within the community that I'm slowly but surely building up. One of them is, like, I do a weekly now office hours where you can meet with me directly. We had a small group of like 5 people yesterday for the office hours, and we got to chat face to face. I got to answer questions that way. So anyhow, lots of other benefits for all access members, but a university's degrees worth of courses is reason in itself. So anyhow, check it out, and I will see you next time. Feel free to drop me ideas in the community for future topics. But thanks again for being here, and I will see you next time.